Hello, my name is Bob King, and apparently these people think that I'm the king of sandwich, and I'm interested in hearing my story. And so basically I begin to multitask a little bit. So I put the oven on. I have I always have multiple tasks. These are portobello mushroom stems. I bought a box of sliced mushrooms that came in this morning, so when I'm done baking, I'll end up moving on to probably making mushroom barley soup. There's very little that isn't homemade from scratch. So the soups are all made from scratch, and just as a means of not running out of ideas for what to make, because I have to make in the wintertime I make 5 gallons of each variety of soup at a time, and I would guess that I probably make 30 gallons a week, 30 to 40 gallons a week of soup in the winter. In the summer it slows down substantially. We probably go down to about 15 gallons of soup in the summertime. But then if I make a cold soup like gazpacho, then it kind of makes up for it. I don't always have the time for that, so I don't commit to it. So I guess I would have to say it all started when I was the summer after 10th grade. A friend of mine asked me if I would be willing to ride bikes with her and another girl to the Cape, where her parents were camping, and they didn't want the 2 girls riding bikes alone from Duxbury. But that if she could get a boy to ride along, they would agree to let her do it. So I said, sure. So I got on my 1-speed bike in Duxbury and rode all the way down Route 3A and walked our bikes over the Sagamore Bridge, got onto Route 1, which I now know is Main Street 130. And I always remembered that around the time I passed the Chamois Kroll campground, something just sort of came over me, and I was just completely enchanted by this town. And I really didn't even know where I was. I was just following my friend Susan, whose parents were camping, come to find out at Peters Pond Campground. So, we followed along, and we ultimately ended up stopping at Quail Hollow and got an apple or an orange or something, and we went across the street and sat under the trees at Wings School. And I always remembered that little farm stand. And so we got to the campground, and at the end of the weekend we put the bikes on top of the camper and went home to Duxbury. And I really never much thought about sandwich again, except that I do remember saying to my friends while we were taking water from the artesian well in Town Hall Square that this is exactly the kind of town I want to live in when I grow up. This is a batch of Morning Glory muffins that were made yesterday afternoon before we left. This is a batch of what will become Jordan Marsh blueberry muffins. So I made the batters, and then I will add blueberries and tin them and bake them off. Let's see, these are barrels of pickle spears, and we use usually one of those every day, so I'll leave one out, and when our prep kids get here, they'll can those up for us. Usually by 6:15 I'm here. Tobin, who is still an avid newspaper reader, has to stop and pick up 3 newspapers at the store on his way to work, so he gets here a few minutes after me. And then our manager, Donna, she usually arrives at about 6:30 as well. So she works at getting the upstairs squared away, getting coffee started. We open at 8, but we have guys that come in at about 7:15 to 7:30 who just want coffee. And if anybody wants to come in and once the coffee's made, and it's usually made by about 6:30, 6:45, anybody that wants a coffee, we don't turn them away. We open the door and we just explain that we're not going to be serving breakfast yet, but that if there's a muffin or a cookie or a baked good and a cup of coffee that they want before 8 o'clock, they're welcome to have that. So fast forward, I don't know, it must have been when I was 25, 1982. I had graduated from college, and really all the experience that I had in my working life was in restaurants. And so So I went looking for a restaurant, and it was just kismet that a restaurant broker in Hyannis, who had shown me a few things in Hyannis, had said, now on your way off Cape, at the time I was living in Boston, he said, stop in Sandwich. There's this little place called Marshland, and the guy's lease is going to be up, and he really wants to get out of there and has to make a decision quickly. So I did. I stopped, and I thought, wow, this place I could really work with. This is cute. It's got its own parking. It's freestanding. It was unlike anything else I had been shown, and it was sort of in my price range, which was not very much money. I had $5,000 saved that I was going to use to go to Europe for the summer with. And then this opportunity presented itself. And yet I really didn't know where I was going to get the rest of the money that it took to buy it. And as you know, one thing after another works out. I oftentimes say, I think when you set an intention for something, the world sort of cooperates with you. So I went about looking for the rest of the money, and the owner financed some of it, and I had an aunt that lent me some money, and my brother lent me some money, and I was up and running. And on March 21st, 1982, I bought Marshland Restaurant. At the time that I bought it, it really didn't even have a printed menu. It was kind of odd. It was just regular townies would come in and just say what they wanted, and I don't even know how they established how much they paid for it. But we printed a menu, we hung plants, we took an old book of Audubon prints and cut them out and framed them, and sort of collaged the walls with them. We made special boards, and it wasn't long before people in town discovered that Marshland was a different place. At the time, believe it or not, there wasn't even a Dunkin' Donuts in town. And we were having a real issue in our dining room with people going on their way to work, stopping in to get a cup of coffee, and the waitresses were tied up with people giving people coffees to go while there were people out at tables waiting to get waited on. And so I thought we could put a little takeout bakery and coffee shop in that side of the building, and it's there today. And so we did. We cut through the wall, and we installed ovens, and we made a little bakery. And in the day, we decided that it was already a donut shop in town, and so we really focused on muffins. And it was incredible how many muffins we would sell. I mean, we would have somebody have someone come in the afternoon, and they would fill the bakery case with muffins. They would fill 2 rolling covered bakery racks with trays of muffins, and then in the morning somebody would come in. We would open at 6 o'clock in the morning. Those would start to sell, and then somebody in the morning would start to replenish. And literally, I mean, we would sell hundreds of muffins. And in fact, I remember the Boston Globe said that our muffins were bodacious. Yeah. Well, Marshland was, I always say, is the classic. The classic American diner. It still is. I think it's a concept that can survive and continue to always be a concept that works in restaurants, because everybody's interested in that classic sort of diner style restaurant. So usually I throw an apron on if I'm going to be baking. Yesterday we made M&M cookies, and we made peanut butter cookies. So these today, now that they've been frozen, they'll be put into these plastic buckets and marked. So that doesn't mean that every day I have to make a fresh batch of chocolate chunk cookie dough. So what we'll do is Donna, who's upstairs organizing the bakery area, will come down and ultimately give us a list of what we have to bake off the cookies for today. This is a really old muffin tin that I've had, I think, going back to maybe when we owned Marshland Restaurant.
Wow.
It's really well seasoned, and I like to bake our corn muffins in it. I don't know why. I just have this thing about that muffin tin and corn muffins. We make a pickled palmy vegetable. It's daikon radish and carrots, and I make a really big batch of it at a time. It's a hassle. It's just a lot of work. You have to, it's not just peeling peeling the daikon radish and the carrots, but then you have to take a mandolin and by hand. You can't use a food processor because they come out too thin.
Oh, okay.
So it's all going to be done with what they call a mandolin, which is it's a little device with sharp blades, and you just have to keep sliding the carrot back and forth, and it makes little julienne strips. So I have to do that with 15 pounds of carrots, and then I have to do the same thing with 15 pounds of daikon radish. I don't have to, but I do it that way because if I do, I only have to do it about once a month. I opened Marshland, and about 2 years later, well, maybe it was about three, actually it was probably about 3 or 4 years later, I started Sandwiches, which was a little sandwich shop at Russell's Corner, and it's still there. Doug Amidon, the sign maker, made us a really wonderful sign, and it enabled people to create a sandwich, which was something sort of new at the time. There'd be like a section of breads, a section of fillings, a section of toppings, a section for spreads, we called them, and I think it's a section for cheeses. And the lettering was all put on plexiglass panels so that if you ran out of something, you could just take that panel down, or if you wanted to add something, you could add a panel in. It was really kind of a new idea then. I mean, it's now today it's sort of more commonplace, but at the time that was sort of a new, fresh concept of start with the basics and create your own. With Sandwiches, that was unique. That was, wasn't like going into, a sub shop where you picked the Italian or you picked the tuna or whatever. It was, you really did have the opportunity to create your own sandwich on, exactly how you wanted it. So now I'm going to do blueberry muffins. And I have a friend who worked at Jordan Marsh and said one of the secrets to Jordan Marsh blueberry muffins is that they don't put in the recipe is that they always ground up or crushed blueberries as well as putting in whole ones. So, handfuls of blueberries. And all we're going to do is just give them a little pulse because they're ground up. They will go in.
She just took the last crouton.
All right, now there's more always in the back room. And then I save some of those blueberries, and I'll use those on the, what we do is after we pan these, I'll put a couple of blueberries on the top of the muffin, and then I also put some what they call sanding sugar, which is coarse sugar on the top of the. And then if I just don't feel like, just doesn't seem like there's enough blueberries in there, then I'll add a few. And this is Dan, the major man on the line. So he'll start setting up upstairs. He'll be, putting soups out, getting eggs, getting home fries, stocking his refrigerator with all of the things he's going to need for the day. It's funny, when we first opened, we just, we operated a lot like Panera Bread does. You just came in, you placed your order, you turned around and you went and you found a place to sit. And that worked out really well for the first couple of years that we were in business. But now it's just become so busy that you can't rely on the fact that there's going to be a table waiting for you if you get in line and order food. So we've really had to hire somebody, for crowd control. So this is just a little bit of coarse sugar. And then in 1992, the building that had been the first edition became available. The local bank, the Sandwich Cooperative Bank, was holding it, and it had been abandoned, and they were looking to get it off their balance sheet. And so we approached them about, what's going on with that building, and there were several people that were interested in it, and we were very lucky that we had a reputation in town and track record. And I think that it was a different time in a sense then. I think that who you were and what you did and what you had for a track record mattered in banking, and I'm not so sure that that's as big a part of the equation anymore. I think today it seems like it's all about what do you have for money, what's the dollars and cents of it, not as opposed to sort of your personal integrity or background or experience. So we thought, well, this is a great opportunity. Well, because we didn't own the real estate at Marshland, and we could own the real estate, and it was a much bigger restaurant, serving lunch and dinner, and had a liquor license. So we went for it, and we opened what we called the Beehive Tavern in 1992. It was much more, rather than sort of what I would call diner-style food, it went into really full dinners, and we did baked seafood, we did fried seafood, we had broiled steaks and chops, and we had to do a vegetable of the day, and a mashed potatoes, and baked potatoes, and rice pilaf, and chowder, and soups, and we still made all our own salad dressings. And it was, when I think back, I was so lucky to have the staff that I did, because virtually all of them stuck with me for the whole 14 years that we were there. And like I said, we were in the right place at the right time. With Marshland, the town was small, it was just poised to begin growing, and it did. So, and there wasn't a lot of other options then, so, we did really well with Marshland. There were no Dunkin' Donuts. We had all that coffee to-go business as well. And the same thing was true with the Beehive. When we opened the Beehive, there really weren't, there was no 99 on Cape Cod. There were very few, even dinner restaurants in town or nearby. So that proved to be a lucky move for us. Of course, at the time, it was stressful and it was a lot of work, but, in retrospect, I think it was also a lot of fun, and I just, I marvel. I mean, there were times, I can remember literally like having to take people from like the middle of the restaurant over to a side dining room, and the bar between us being so full of people that I would have to take them through the kitchen to get to the side dining room, because we just couldn't push our way through the bar. We did that until 2004, and by 2004 we just really felt that we were sort of burned out. We had a long run in the restaurant business, and we just thought it was time to take a break. So we ended up selling it, and we did very well. I don't want to be critical, but I think some of that formula that made us successful was changed, and as a result, the business just kind of dwindled off. I like to bake the blueberries in the top of the oven so that they rise better. And there's that timer. I was a little bit ahead of it. And this is a really good muffin, I think. This is probably my favorite muffin. It's you grate carrots, you add coconut, you add grated fresh apple, you put raisins in. There's eggs and sugar and baking soda and baking powder, of course. There's lots of spice, cinnamon and some cardamom and nutmeg, and what else is in this? And
that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's kind of a fruity muffin. I don't know. It's really delicious, I think. There's 2 kinds of soup every day, and we probably set up 3 gallons of each kind every day. And most of that, in the wintertime, most of that soup will sell. But it's at least how much you have to have on hand. All right, so that should work. Those will go on the rack. We keep these just for weights. Let's see. So that's the muffin routine is done. These I'll put away in the walk-in, and I'll have more of them tomorrow.
That's what my makeup is.
So if you look in there, all those blue buckets, blue-capped buckets, those are basically soups and pickles. Anything with a label on it's a soup. And Dan's in there. We have our system. I should say. I ended up managing the Outer Bar and Grill at the Wachusett Resort. And after 3 or 4 seasons of that, together with, and I would just work summers. And, we just sort of felt like, well, I kind of felt at any rate that I was giving my mojo away. That, why am I working so hard for somebody else if I'm going to, because I really, to be honest, worked harder for the resort than I think I had for myself. And it was very demanding and very, very high-end, very exclusive. People spent a lot of money to stay there and had very high expectations, and which was great. I learned an awful lot about customer service and, meeting those needs. But I also felt like, well, if I'm going to do this, I should be doing it for myself. And that was the other reason we sort of went seeking another place. And, ask and ye shall receive. And it was around that time that I had been going to what was the Merchant Square Deli, and I just thought, wow, this space is got a lot of untapped potential. It had 2 beautiful outdoor patios with no furniture on them. It was an authentic post and beam building. It took a lot for us to build it out. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the whole downstairs of Cafe Chu is where the prep kitchen is, and that's really where most of the work goes on. And the upstairs is really just where the folks are assembling the sandwiches and salads, but everything that's baked and prepped and the salad dressings and the soups and all that stuff is being done downstairs, which is why you don't see me at Cafe Chu very much, because I'm stuck in the, I always jokingly say they lock me in the cellar. Compared to the Beehive Tavern, all we're gonna have to do is make soup and salads and sandwiches that, it's like the Cold Station. This is gonna be a piece of cake. And, in the summertime, it takes 4 of us constantly pounding out the prep work to just keep up with the volume of food that's being sold out of that place. It turned out to be, unfortunately, a lot more work than we had anticipated, but I guess nothing worth doing ever comes easy, so it's just been a good experience. The story of our coffee is funny. We were at Joe's in Provincetown. We were at Bank Street Coffee in Harwich. We were at the Underground Cafe in Dennis, and we were at Bucky's in Dennisport. And in each time, being coffee fiends, we noticed that the coffee was really good in all 4 of those places and asked, hey, where did you get your coffee? And all of them said Indigo Coffee in Northampton. So when we opened, we knew that's where we're gonna go. And, wonderful woman. She worked up formulas for our coffees that, with a blend that I think is really good. I think it's the best coffee in town. No brag, just fact. We kind of knew when we opened that, given that our background and the fact that we had had restaurants in the past, that we could get people in based on our reputation, but that's not going to get them back. If after they come in, it's not a good experience, that doesn't guarantee the fact that they're ever going to come back again. So, we were lucky that we had that reputation in terms of getting people initially to come in, but like I said, that doesn't always get them to come back. And, I'm grateful for that. Cafe Chu's popularity has definitely brought Merchant Square to life. We actually will have, for the first time, I think, since Merchant Square was built, I think our section will have 100% occupancy. The people who have retail stores there have said that, the fact that all of these people come to Cafe Chu will then be curious. And I think it's important to work with other businesses like that. That doesn't mean it doesn't work in the opposite either. So it's a very symbiotic thing. For my next act, I'm going to start making a batch of soup. And basically, all of our soups, people always say, oh, you should give a soup making lesson, but all of our soups begin with mirepoix or a sort of sofrito, I think it's kind of stuff, but it's basically, I'm going to chop onions, celery, and carrots. I'm going to put those in the soup pot. We're lucky we have what is called a soup jacket, so I don't have to get in the way of the cooks upstairs. I can make soup down here. I can make it in a device that doesn't require a hood, so that I'm not in anyone's way, and I get my own little hot. Those onions, this is not probably how Martha Stewart chops an onion, but that's how I do it.
So Dan, are you working up there with a couple people, or?
Yeah, there's usually 3 of us on the line. During the winter time, we'll cut it down to 2 just because it slows down enough to do so. But yeah, eventually we get cranking and it's just lettuce and eggs flying.
We use portobello mushrooms for our mushrooms upstairs, and they come with this with a stem that's actually quite meaty. So what I usually do is I just chop that little part where they've been growing in the dust. There's a little band of mushroom I remove. I will just shovel these onions into it. Saute that in. If you're a bad boy, you get spanked with this, but otherwise we use it to stir soup with. And what I will do is probably rotate them. And move them from one side to the other. You are seeing basically one of the reasons why people prefer to bake with electric ovens. They'll have, like our oven at home is a restaurant stove, and it has 6 burners and a griddle on the top, and it has 2 that are gas, but the ovens are electric. And you don't deal with, what often happens with gas ovens is that the flames must be of different heights, so one side of the oven might cook faster than the other, and that's what happens in this oven. The left side, the outside edge of the left side just seems to get hotter than the rest of the oven, so I'm always sort of rotating things around. People will oftentimes say, well, what is the formula for a successful restaurant? And you know, I think there's 3 things that a successful restaurant, if they have all 3 of them, will definitely be successful. And one is a good location. You know, people have to be able to find you easily. That's helpful. It's not always absolutely completely necessary, because if, on the other hand, you also have good food, is the second component that I think is an absolute necessity, over even a better location. I mean, and the third thing is atmosphere. So if you have a building or a space that's interesting and atmospheric, and it has great food, and it has a good location, then it's kind of hard to lose. Well, you know, I have never taken credit for sort of inventing the wheel. I pay attention. I think, you know, if you're plugged, I guess I'm a foodie. You know, I just read a lot about food. I have magazines. I eat out a lot. I pay attention. That's my interest. So I think that also, in a way, that's why Cafe Chu is popular, because I think we have offerings that are unusual or more creative. You know, we're lucky to have Pan d'Avignon as a bakery to get great artisan breads. And that has started to sizzle already. The other thing I do sometimes is I'll add a little bit of water just to get things, you know, it'll end up evaporating out and the stuff will saute, but it just gives it a chance to start cooking and getting sort of simmering and softening. We don't get a lot of negative feedback, but when we do, I've always believed that you should not get defensive and really like explore, are the people making a good point? And a lot of times they are. I mean, we get we get very few complaints about the food. The thing, it's odd. The thing that I touched on earlier that people get the most annoyed with or complain about the most is the chaos of coming in and getting acclimated. Where do I sit? Where do I order? Where's their menu? And that's really why we have somebody now who just meets and greets and sort of guides people, because that seems to be the thing that annoys people the most is You know, why do I have to wait to order until I get a table? And you have to explain to them, you know, well, because you're going to get your food before you have a place to sit with it. Or, you know, it's just they just complain about how crazy it is. You know, that this is chaotic, I'm confused, but I think, you know, we do a very good job of
chaos.
Yeah.
And on the other end of the spectrum, is it interesting to? I think you guys are the #1 TripAdvisor restaurant in Sandwich. Is that? Does it even like come into your mind? Does it even matter?
And I think personally, our success in the restaurant business is based a lot on the idea that we make so much from scratch. That, you know, if we can make it ourselves, usually you can make it better if you make it yourself. We do. All the baked goods at Cafe Chu are made from scratch. They're made with butter rather than shortening. They're made with good quality chocolate. When you know that's the case, that chocolate's being used. The difference comes through. You know, whether it's that person being conscious of it or not, they just know it tastes good. But I'm saying the reason I think it tastes good is because it's homemade and it's from scratch, and it's maybe even, you know, better quality than what you can buy pre-made. You know, when I make a tray of 96 brownies, I would bet that they probably have close to 15 pounds of chocolate in it. And, you know, I think it's a huge difference between a piece of brown cake, it's called a brownie, and this really, you know, ultimate, you know, honestly, to die for brownie that we make. And those are the little, I think, the differences that, you know, set you apart. And, you know, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort, and I think it's oftentimes more work and effort than a lot of people want to put in. And maybe that's why, you know, we do well, because we do put in that work and that effort. Because, like I said, a lot of places, you know, they'll buy this product called Kettle Cuisine soup. It's not a bad product, but it's pre-made soups that are frozen. They're in plastic bags that you cut open and just put in your steam table. You know, our salad dressings we even make from scratch. So, and we've kind of always been like that, and I think that that's, in a way, what, you know, has always driven our popularity, is the fact that, you know, I think they taste the difference. So, what I do is I tap the top of the muffin to make sure it's firm, and it is. And these I'm just going to cook a few more minutes to get them a little darker. And all these cookies are made with all butter. They're all made from scratch. They're all made like your grandmother would have made them. Now, a lot of restaurants will use what they call a scoop and bake product. It's white buckets full of already prefabbed muffin doughs, cookie doughs. And the cookies take about 12 minutes, but just to be safe, I'll set the timer for 10. You know, the restaurant industry, I think, is a very good industry for people who have ADHD, because, which I have in spades. And, of course, in my day, you know, you weren't diagnosed with that. You just basically figured out how to make it work for you. And there are, I think, like this is definitely an industry where it works for you, because you really are, as you can kind of see, you've got 2 or 3 things going on all the time. I got soup over there. I've got cookies in that are going to have to come out before the muffins. The muffins are going to have to be rotated and turned and lowered on the shelf eventually. You know, the soup has to be finished up. I'm very comfortable with that. You know, some people are type Bs and they just, you know, like very methodical and, you know, sort of one thing at a time. And I like having 2 or 3 things going at a time. And as you can see, it's cooking away. See what I mean about what everybody else is doing? It's like, where do those cups come from? They don't just magically appear. So usually by, like, at 8 o'clock, the other people, you know, Karen, who runs the prep kitchen, and Richie, who is her sort of #1 assistant, they will arrive, and I'm just going to rinse these. And so anyone that, I think there's only 1 or 2 high schoolers that come in and help us on the weekends, and they'll do, simple things like chop home fries or whatever, and but we're here to guide them with, sort of the rules of serve safe, and they can still work here without it, but somebody has to oversee them. When I started, that wasn't a consideration at all. It was, you just did your thing, and see how they're darker on this side than on that side. So that's why I was saying, like, sometimes the gas oven will cook a little bit harder on one side than the other. So I'm just going to dump all of these mushrooms into this pot. So these. Now, I think that this is a lot of mushrooms to put into a mushroom soup. I mean, I'm glad you're here to film this. One of the complaints we had one time, and I think the woman just said it because she thought she was funny, but she got served mushroom barley soup, and she complained that she called it mushroom barely. Now, I mean, how many more mushrooms can I fit in this 5-gallon pot? And so that's basically how my day begins. And in a few minutes, I'll have more help down here. Our dishwasher will arrive. We'll get all the dirty dishes upstairs, and he'll get underway. There's a list over here. Here she is, Karen. So she will, begin reviewing the list, and Bob's your uncle, as they say in England. I'll tell you, it's incredible how many people will come in from other towns and say, oh, and I think this is probably true, that a Cafe Chew would work so well in our town. Why don't you come to Hingham? Why don't you come to Duxbury? Why don't you come to Plymouth or come to Marshfield? Or, people from all over the place will say that oftentimes, like, oh, I think this concept will work well. And, I don't know. Sandwiches is my home. I love Sandwich. I love living here. I think it's a beautiful place. Even after living here all this time, almost 35 years, on a daily basis, I am still blown away by something, the beauty of something. Today it was looking over Sham Pond as I crossed the bandstand, and the snow and the ice and the sun and the way it hit, and it was like stunning. Or I'll be driving home from Cafe Chew, and I'll look out and the tide will be high and the marsh will be full, and you can see the boardwalk and the dunes, and it's just beautiful. I really do have a strong belief in the idea that, when you set an intention for something, or you have a dream or an idea for something, and you want it to happen, and you really put it out there, that it does. And so in each instance, it wasn't that I knew that this is going to happen, but I wished and hoped for it, I guess, and kept my eyes and my ears open, and something presents itself, and you say, hey, that's, I think, what I've been looking for, or what I've been thinking about. I love Sandwich. I think it's a great town. I know a lot of people here, and my life is kind of, to be honest with you, just sort of come true in the terms of how I always hoped or dreamed it would. I ended up with the house I always wanted and never wanted for more. The businesses have always been good and thrived and provided me with a good living, and I've made great friends here and great partnership and marriage. Yeah, everything's sort of worked out. I have no complaints. Like the old lady in Grey Gardens, Big Edie says about her, living in her house, the only way I'm leaving is feet first.